I'm going to come back and present our recommendations and a call to action. But first, I am very excited to introduce our board chair, Luis Avila, who is going to moderate our student panel. I'm going to ask our students to come on up, and while Luis and students come up here, I will tell you that, and let's give them a nice welcoming hand. Luis, by the way, in addition to getting the short straw to have to manage me, is the president and founder of Iconico Campaigns, a company that works to build advocacy capacity in organizations around the country. Luis.
First of all, I want to thank you all for being here this morning. I know you made it through the rain. And thank the students, too, for coming from different parts of the country to share their infinite wisdom with us. When I was 11 years old, from a corner in my room, I would hear my parents yell at each other. Sometimes it was because my father would arrive drunk and start a fight. Sometimes it was because my mother was desperate trying to find a way to cover our most basic necessities. I was actually a pretty good student in school. I would complete my assignments. I would do well on my grades. But when things started ramping up at home, I started disengaging in school. I put my head down, didn't pay attention, started actually pretending that I was sick, getting out of the classroom. And one day in recess, my teacher, Lupita, came to me. And she asked me what was going on. And she said something that to this day, I still remember in those moments when the imposter syndrome hits me. She said, "You are way brighter than you believe to be. You can do whatever you want in life. You just have to choose to do it." And she asked me what I wanted to do in the future. And for the first time, I felt seen at 11 years old. For the first time, I felt heard. She started giving me more homework, more challenging homework, and more challenging assignments in the classroom because she knew I could complete them. And she told me that her expectations were higher than those that I was meeting. From time to time, she would actually even call home and check on me. She reached out to my parents and told them what was going on, and they all took immediate action for me to get back on track. Reading the Opportunity myth reminded me of that moment. Not because back then we had standards that we know now, but because expectations have always been around us, regardless of policy, regardless of law. I feel privileged and lucky today to hear from these amazing students that I had the chance of meeting this morning, and I please ask you to give them the biggest round of applause so we can get started. So earlier today, we were asking each other, how are we going to get started with this conversation? And I said, I hate when in panels, we know and we expect that everybody's going to go one and one and one and one, right? So what I told them is the first question, I want to hear all of you answer the question. But I'm going to actually ask this question to one of them, and then they're going to tell us who's next, okay? And then the next question after that, I'm just going to see who wants to answer it, and we'll go from there. So the first question I'm going to ask, if you can share your name. I'm going to start with you, Julie. And I'm going to ask you to share your name, where you're from, and what do you want to do after school? What are your desires and aspirations?
My name is Julie Hayducky. I'm a 9th grade student in Bridgeport. I attend Achievement First Amistad High School in New Haven, Connecticut, and I hope to be an education journalist.
Who do you want first? Who do you want to go next?
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kimberly Pham. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a non-traditional student, so I attend Temple University part-time studying social work. And my aspirations is for young people, young adults, to be valued, their experiences and knowledge, to be able to be a part of decision making around decisions that truly impact them. So really shaping culture and the nonprofit, all different sectors, shaping culture and narrative.
Kimberly, before you pass the mic, what do you want to do?
Whew. Yeah, I want to be a part of that process. So really influencing people's thinking is my job in that.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly.
Good morning. My name is Vasiki. I'm originally from New York City, Queens, and I'm a junior at Colby College studying physics. And I think my aspirations as of now is to become an engineer, and I'm hoping to work with underserved communities primarily.
Thank you.
Good morning, buenos dias. So my name is Martin. I'm from Long Beach, California. I'm a recent UCLA graduate. I just received my BA in political science with a minor in Chicano studies. And so I'm trying to continue in law. I hope to continue into law school. And I spoke to some of the people backstage, and I let them know that employment law is something that I'm interested in, but also educational law, just because, when I was reading this, I definitely saw a lot of what I thought was already known and true, and so I wish to continue doing this work and hopefully establish this. It's a lot of the work that was put in and make it known to a wider, greater audience, and hopefully enough people that we can actually make a substantial change. Yeah. Thank
you, Martin. Well, let's actually start with the big question about the actual information we are sharing today, right? Some of us were talking in the back about how we were reacting to it. Who would like to share about, what jumped at you? What seemed familiar about the report on your own academic experience? Anybody? You want to go first?
Yeah, I guess since I have the mic. I think for me, one thing that I really kept thinking about when I was reading over this was the fact that I kept thinking about my favorite teachers a lot. I kept thinking about Mr. Stanley, my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Alcala, my 5th grade teacher. And I just kept thinking about how they kept pushing me forward. And I didn't realize why. But as I kept reading this, I think they saw a little bit of themselves in me. And so I think for me, that was my biggest reaction was, why is it that I only had a couple educators instead of having my entire life spent, now that I've reached, this finish line, how is it that I only had a couple shining moments instead of, an entire educational career where I had people that stood out in so many different ways? I had a couple shining bright moments. And I think for me, my reaction was, I thought a lot of this was already known. Why is it that I could only remember 2 instances where I felt that support? So for me, and my reaction to this report was, this isn't known, this isn't widespread information, and I really want to make sure that continues to continue out into the places that this information needs to be getting to.
Great. Vasiki, would you like to?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think what stood out to me the most while reading the report and that I could really resonate with was the dichotomy and the performance between students of color and white students at schools across the country, and how that intersected with teachers' expectations of those students. And I know it really resonated with my experience thinking about as a Black student, what teachers expected of me, or what they didn't expect of me versus what they expected of my peers who were of other racial backgrounds, and the kind of stereotypes they kind of put on me, and how that affected my performance in school.
Julie, I would love to hear, you're in 9th grade right now. Share a little bit about what from the report feels real and close to you right now.
When I first read this report, I thought about my experience at Achievement First. Right now, 100% of students in my high school are accepted into a 4-year college or university. How many of them are prepared? We don't know. When I go to school every day, I wonder, though 100% of us are accepted, this gap continues to show itself in the classroom. So far this year, 3 of my teachers have left. So when teacher turnover is that real throughout my school, I don't know how that's influencing my academic career, even though this data I'm experiencing this data.
Thank you, Julie. Kimberly, we were talking earlier about non-traditional students as you were referring, and I would love to hear, what role amazing teachers play in making sure that we continue our education, right?
Wow, the role is critical, as educators know, because students spend a lot of time in school. That's half of our life. That's our 9 to 5 when we're younger. And it's a vital role that teacher plays, and I know it's exhausting. I remember being the kid that you want on your hip, and I remember being the kid that gets sent to the accommodation room. And it can be different feelings and, different responsibilities that educators have to deal with, but their role is so vital and critical. Like I said, it's a second home for some folks. But most importantly, it's still like a job for a young person. We spend about 8 hours in school. That's a lot of time. Then you go home, you kind of had dinner, and then it's like back to school again, And seeing that teacher every day, having high expectations, I think that's the closest I've felt to school, really understanding what does school all really mean. That teacher really helps bring that understanding for me as a young person. So I just want to let all educators know, regardless if you're not directly in the classroom with that young person, whether if you're a district supervisor, a principal, everyone in that brick and mortar setting plays a critical role to the young person and how they feel about coming to school. If I feel like my teachers don't care, then 9 times out of 10, I'm going to start not really wanting to care about this place either. Especially when we parents and families set the bar high for school. You need to get there on time. This is where you're going to learn a lot about, life and stuff like that. So that connection, it doesn't need to be a disconnect with what kind of gets said at home with families and parents about that high expectation of school and what's the outcome, when you kind of put all your efforts into it. So educators just have a vital role.
Kimberly, do you remember a particular educator that made a big impact, positive or more of a challenging impact in your experience in school?
Like I share, all my teachers did. I always try to make a learning lesson out of everything. I was a mentally gifted student, so I kind of seen that trajectory of being advanced. Having those divided expectations for young people living in a low income community, being Asian and Latinx in a black and brown community, the realities is real. You kind of see the raw facts, that you kind of set the standards low for some people, and you don't want it to be transparent and say it's a race issue or whatever, but clearly there's not equitable education. The field is not even out for people. I noticed that being a mentally gifted student, going outside of the classroom, then coming back inside of the classroom, why am I not really feeling like I'm learning here? Why am I being much challenged here? Why are these students even feeling like I don't even know how they're feeling like they're gonna go somewhere when they don't know that their learning, their quality of learning is low, And then outside of that, you have these kids that are looked upon as nerds or the smart ones, when honestly, school, we should have an even playing field. If you have some people who want to overachieve, make room for those people. But at the end of the day, we should all know what we need to know to get through life.
Yes, thank you. Now, we heard a lot about assignments, right? And how we are not, as students, receiving challenging assignments, right? Do you remember assignments or experiences in the classroom that were challenging and exciting from any moment in your academic career, in your academic experience? All of you shaking your heads? Go for it.
I would definitely say in high school, my first year, the 9th grade English teacher I had was extremely challenging, and a lot of students felt a lot of different ways about that. The fact that she challenged students and pushed students, she made us read a lot of different types of books that you may not have expected 9th graders to read. I remember we read Fallen Angels by, I believe his name is Walter Dean Myers, and that was an amazing book. And then she had us write an extended an extended ending to the original novel. So basically, she was teaching us how to like kind of create like an extended story with a overarching plot line, and just kind of go into details and like make us become better writers. And this was 9th grade, and she was like, yeah, like you have a minimum of like 15 pages, so get to it. And and I remember like at first I was scared, but then when I started writing, like I got like, super into it and super excited about it. And like I think it was at that point that like I got more into like just writing and creative writing in general. And like I think her challenging me and like just the class in that way, I think just kind of prepared me in a way that was very beneficial, like moving forward through my academic career.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You were shaking your head, Martin, earlier. What assignments do you remember were challenging, but in a good way?
Yeah, so for me, in high school, my sophomore year, I had this teacher, Miss Vitali. And so she was my English teacher, and for all of our readings, we had to write extended works, and it was just long essays, really reflective essays. She really wanted us to think about what we were reading, why we were reading it, what we were supposed to learn from it and gain from it, and so that we could have full-blown conversations about it in class. But every time that we had to write an essay, I just remember my papers looking as if someone had just laid a steak on top of it, because there was just so much red. And that's not necessarily in the bad way, because ultimately, like, we still got the good grades, but she made me work for every single mistake that I had. She made me work to fix it the next time, and then the next time, and I mean, eventually I ended up with the white paper, but I mean, if it hadn't started off like someone had just laid a steak on top of it as butcher paper really quickly, I don't think it would have ever gotten there. So I think, I mean, even being told that I was wrong was good, because it meant I had to get better, and so it was a good thing for me, at least. It was challenging, but it was good to finally get that read off sometime. Yeah.
Julie, what are your favorite assignments? What are the ones you enjoy the most?
I enjoy my writing classes in school because I get the opportunity to go above and beyond the expectation and further myself as a writer. And I appreciate the teachers that I've had who have helped me do so. And I appreciate the teachers who have helped me do so and consistently pushed me to go above and beyond. Right now in my writing class, that's not necessarily happening. So I think it's important that we have teachers who support those who want to go above and beyond, so we can do even better and further our own personal growth beyond the curriculum.
I'm going to ask a question, and anybody can answer it. You can start, Julie, because you have the microphone. But do you feel listened to in school? Do you feel like your voice is heard in school? Your desires, your expectations as well?
In school, teachers listen. I can say on a case-by-case basis that teachers do listen to us. However, that's not necessarily changing anything. If I speak to a teacher about a problem in the school, that's not necessarily going to change that issue or even make it to the principal. So I feel like when we're speaking to our students, we need to value their voices to the point where we can create action within our schools to develop a better climate for our students.
Thank you. Anybody else feels like you were listened to in school, your voice mattered, in things that were individual, personal, or in the school setting overall?
In the context of high school, I personally feel like student voices weren't entirely heard. I feel like my high school, because it was a public high school that was under the New York City Department of Education, like there were just a lot of rigid rules and policies that were followed. So a lot of times, like the students had concerns about certain things, like they weren't necessarily addressed. But I will say that after a certain point, I think the school kind of reacted. So for instance, like starting off my first year at the high school I went to, which was Queens Vocational, now known as Queens Tech, like there were very little AP classes. And as we progressed through our 4 years, like I know a lot of people within like my graduating class were like, they were yearning for like an AP class. They wanted like a more academic challenge, and like they kind of pushed for it. And eventually, by our senior year, like they implemented like 3 or 4 AP classes. So it was pretty late into our academic career at the high school, but we didn't have, but it was still an opportunity nonetheless. So I think in that sense that the school did listen, but overall, I do think our voices are usually went unheard and ignored.
Kimberly, what about your experience? We were talking about earlier how important it is for non-traditional students to have a voice and be heard and be participate in their own education. What do you have to say about that?
There's so much to say, Luis.
Please do.
To be honest, I don't feel like I was heard in school. You know, growing up in a low-income community, you just kind of go to school, show up, and it's the same vibe with the teacher. They just kind of come there, show up, do their job. Student voice is valued, but I don't think it's like shown the way it needs to be like displayed, you know. You kind of put it in a department, like we're gonna create a student voice council and they'll speak to these issues, versus like how teachers kind of link up in the back and they all have real conversations. And I think that's where, you know, it needs to be for young people and their voices. Like there needs to be real conversations with all stakeholders and not just it be like, oh yeah, students link up and you guys just talk about it and then bring it back to the adults. It needs to be intergenerational, with all different roles, not just, like I said, not just the educators, but also other people who may be in the building supporting that student as well, whether that's like the lunch lady, the security guard or whatever, like student voice is value, but it needs to be displayed in different ways and not just saying, hey, we have a student voice council and that's, you know, the go-to people to represent student voice. You know, there needs to be a change in culture, like a day where we're linking up and we having groups, you know, like where we all checking in the whole time in school saying either we 100% feeling like we 50%, you know, like a monthly check-in. There's like I shared with you, honestly, that's how I'm viewing student voice right now in the game. Like it's there, but it could be better.
I'm gonna go with you again. About the conversation we're having, something that Martin said is like this information is to be known, right? Even though I felt it, it wasn't written, right? What gives you hope about where we are today, right? Looking at the education system, looking at your own education, you know, this conversation, what gives you hope about the future of education?
What gives me hope is this report, because there was inclusive of actually wanting to not just focus on the quantitative data, but also the qualitative part. Following students, kind of seeing what they're seeing day to day, right? And thinking about like putting yourself back in a person's shoes, right? And really seeing like, damn, well, am I really getting challenged by this work? You know, and if I came from this specific community, do these assignments differ than this zip code over here and things like that? That gives me hope, like finding that data, not just focusing on the quantitative, but that qualitative part. Also, just being real, you know, with the 4 resources that we need to improve on, they're not missing. You know, when I think about high expectations, like you shared earlier, starting the conversation off, that's the thing that resonated for me, our level of thinking for people. You know, if we're educators and we're teachers and we're control of that classroom, we may not have a lot to work with, but we're gonna work with what we got, and we're gonna be advocates. You know, because it's one thing to say, I have high expectations of a student, but I don't have the resources to get you where you need to go. And us as teachers or educators have to be real and advocate to the next one up who's able to get those resources, whether that's your principal, your superintendent. You have to let people know about the challenges, and folks who are in control of making a difference or making impact, creating that impact, should know about it as well. You know, it should not be something like I should be talking to the student like, I really do have high expectations for you, but this school doesn't have what you need. And we do, you know, sometimes we gotta work with what we got, but we have to also ask for more and not be afraid to ask and advocate on the behalf of our young people, because that's the power we have in that space of education. So ensuring that educators are feeling powerful regardless, you know, and I know, like I said, it's hard. It is hard. I just came from my own city. We just regained local control. It's been 16 years. And that process wasn't pretty and liked well by the city, but also introduced me to different dynamics of power and influence we can have and control. You know, if we just speak more and build on that listening. If you heard Julie, like, yeah, people are listening. I think really people may be hearing you. Because the saying is like, I hear you, but when you listen, there's like impact out of that. You know, your behavior may change. The way your perspective about a student may change. You know, you might start to respect them more. So that's just my comments there.
Thank you. Martin, we're gonna go with your hopes, with where we are, right? This is a difficult conversation and one that it's a big monster of a challenge, right?
No, definitely. But I think I have hope for two reasons. As Kimberly mentioned, this report, like, honestly for me, as I was saying, like, I thought a lot of this was common knowledge, or at me, I was like, oh, this, it's happening to me, so why doesn't everyone else see it? So to me, this is the shadow that had been looming has actually manifested itself, is actually present. It's here, it's written, it's on paper, so if you don't believe me, there it is. But not only that, we're also talking about how students have faith and trust in their teachers. And I think that once we start to focus on educators and make sure that they are supported and they have the resources to continue to work on this achievement gap properly, thinking critically, it's hard. As Dan mentioned, like when we continue to push this forward and have to critically think and reflect, that means that we have to overhaul what we're doing. And I think that having this written and this presented now means that we can properly critically do that work and make sure that the children continue to have hope. Because as I was reading this, I just kept thinking of the kids that don't have that voice in policy, cannot stand in a Senate or whatever it might be, or a school board meeting, or even talk to their own teachers. Those are still voices that need to be heard. And so for me, the report does part of that. And then knowing that children still have trust in their teachers, faith in their teachers, means that they're gonna continue to do this work along the way as changes do come. So that's my choice.
Julie, I want to ask you the same question, but you told me you wanted to write about education in the future, right? Mm-hmm. What are you hoping to write about in the future? When you think about the future, what are you hoping to write about? Same stuff that we are talking about today, or different stuff?
I hope that when I start my career, this change will begin to happen. I'll be able to grasp student perspectives from around the country because we'll be starting to make the change. Another thing that gives me hope is the amount of teachers running for office. Whether it's local city council elections, Congress, this is where change begins. They're creating systemic change, but I know a lot of teachers are here and we all care about our students. This change begins in the classroom.
Thank you so much. Isiki, I want to ask you a question. Earlier, Dan was sharing this information about how students of color we have different expectations of students of color, and you were saying this was something I did, right? And this is not something that a report would fix, right? It's a challenging historical conversation we've been having in this country. What gives you hope about the future?
I think what gives me hope, kind of like what we're talking about, like these are conversations that are happening, like between, I know these are conversations that I've had with like my own friends and other peers, and like this report kind of materializes like the problems that exist. And I think with the existence of this report and just the knowledge being spread out, it makes students realize that the problems they're facing in school is not something that they need to internalize and think, oh, this is a me problem, like I'm unable to succeed, but rather recognize that this is a systematic problem that needs to be like addressed and fixed. And I think once students once students are able to feel comfortable, like no longer internalize it, they'll feel more comfortable like voicing themselves and recognizing that they have like kind of give themselves confidence in saying, okay, like this is what's wrong with my education system and it needs to be fixed, you know. And just feeling confident in voicing themselves and letting people around them know that this is an issue that needs to be addressed immediately.
What's the most difficult part of that, Basiki? What is the most difficult part, the most tense and difficult?
Personally, I feel like the most difficult part would have to be the repetition and the energy that it takes up, because I'm imagining like if I'm like in the 10th grade and like I recognize that there's a problem that exists here, and I want to address it. But then I move on to the 11th grade, and it just kind of rematerializes just through like a different environment. And I think that kind of like that in a way may make students feel like there's no way out of like that loop of difficulty and like negative challenge. So I would definitely say like that's the most difficult part of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Last thing, we're going to wrap up. So we have a couple of minutes left, but I want to ask, sometimes in these conversations we have a set of questions we want to ask and the discussion that we have. Sometimes we miss things, right? What do you think we're not talking about that we should be talking about as part of this conversation, a part of the report and the opportunity myth?
So for me, I think something that could be focused on a little bit more is sometimes the implicit bias that does happen. It's not. It's a subconscious taking effect there. So what we need to do is actively think about what we need to change instead of just continuing through what's going on. And I think that could be alleviated a little bit by supporting teachers properly and making sure that they know that they're being recognized for the work that they're doing, properly supported with resources. Money talks, and so when we pay teachers what they should be paid, educators what they should be paid, I think that's gonna lead into a big change.
Great. Kimberly, Julie, what do you think?
I think that we need to address mental health in our schools. Students are experiencing so many things outside of the classroom, and yes, instruction, etc., definitely impacts student achievement. There are things happening beyond the walls of the classroom that are also systemic issues that are not as easy to fix. So I think we need more social workers to begin with in our schools to better support our students on the track to their academic success.
Thank you. Kimberly?
I don't think it may be missing, but just to kind of look at these moments as life-changing. I guess, yeah, the whole thing of education, that it's life-changing opportunities, and that everyone is playing a vital role in that, and stop looking at it as just like, it's just a job. Like you're literally going to have impact on someone's life, and potentially what they will be in life, so just starting to kind of manifest that type of narrative around, teachers helping and creating that life-changing moment for that young person. So we can start to probably put more resources into humans, because this is our only free public benefit, I guess, as a citizen of America. So we need to show more value in it. I'm gonna say that out loud, but yeah, I'm gonna definitely be real on that. But yeah, just reminding folks like this is a life-changing moment or moments that happen throughout K-12, post-secondary, whatever, what you say, what you do, how you treat someone, it plays a role for me, and it's nothing more, I think, caring than seeing someone choose an occupation that comes with a lot of stress, and they know it, so just want to respect everyone who chooses education as this field, because it's not easy, and we seem undervalued at times, but we still push through. And just reminding people, like, you are there with someone and you could potentially change someone's life and the way that they're thinking about, school, whether if it's dropping out, not wanting to come tomorrow because, I can't deal with this assignment. But
Basiki, take us home.
Yeah. I definitely want to second Julie on the mental health aspect. And I do think that one thing that can be changed is having more educators of color in the classroom, because I'm a firm believer in this idea that like students of color sitting in the classroom, like if they're being taught by someone that looks like them, that may come from a similar background as them, it does truly impact or plays a part in like how they perform in the classroom, how comfortable they feel with the instructor that's standing in front of them, and just overall like how they navigate through like their academic career. Like I think that's a really big impact, and I think like that's one thing to kind of strive for. Yeah. Well,
I want to thank you for your infinite wisdom, as I said earlier. And I want to thank you for opening up and being so candid and sharing all this amazing. What gives me hope, it's the social worker, the engineer, the writer, the attorney that you're all going to become and help us change this society for better. Thank you so much.